Hello future officers, welcome to another session of NewsKase, wherein we try to bring in the most relevant of current news that is integrated with both prelims as well as mains. So let us begin, and our today's session would be about the recent COP28, that is Conference of Parties, which has been concluded in Dubai, UAE. So COP28, a crucial moment for climate change. We will see that what were the hits and what were the misses this time around in COP28, right? But before that, let us try and see that should we read it from our mains perspective or should we read it from our prelims perspective. So definitely yes, lot of times UPSC has focused on this key major international agreements or key major international conferences which are concerning with global warming, which are concerning with climate change for that matter, right? So in year 2021, in GS paper 3, UPSC has asked one specific or direct question, that is, describe the major outcomes of 26th session of Conference of Parties, famously known as COP, to the UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the second part of the question was, what are the commitments made by India in this conference? So this was a 15 marks and we had to answer this in 250 words, right? So बहुत direct question पूछा था in year 2021. So let us see. First of all, what do we mean by COPs? So COPs, as most of us are aware, that these are the gatherings which are held within the framework of UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it is a multinational treaty which was established in year 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, right? And they adopt decisions and resolutions on various aspects with related to climate action, such as mitigation, adaptation, as well as finance, which is very crucial link to fight climate change, technology and transparency. Now let us see what are the key takeaways from this particular COP28. But before that, let us have a look at a prelims question which was asked back in 2010, and it was again related to UNFCCC is an international treaty drawn at. बहुत direct question, right? Absolutely direct questions have been asked in the past by UPSC when it comes to UNFCCC or COP for that matter. So the correct answer is option B. So let us straight away move to this year's key outcomes. So first and the foremost was GST. Now this GST has nothing to do with our Indian GST. So this is basically global stock take text. What is global stock take test, right? So basically in Conference of Parties back in 2015, very famous Paris Agreement, it was signed, right? So Paris Agreement signed to ho gaya, but whether our international community is on the right path or not, usko check karne ke liye, usko judge karne ke liye, we have global stock take. It is, just to give you an analogy, आपने अपने बच्चे का एडमिशन करा तो दिया स्कूल में, बट उनके कितना प्रोग्रेस है in different subjects, so that would be evaluated after certain periods. Class test होगा, फिर yearly test, half yearly test, so on and so forth. तो इसी तरीके से we had Paris Climate Agreement back in 2015, but whether the international governments, societies or communities are working in that particular direction, तो कितना हम उस रास्ते पे चले हैं या नहीं चले हैं, that would be known or measured by global stock take test. So it is a periodic review mechanism established under Paris Agreement back in 2015, and the thematic areas of GST, that is global stock take text, are mitigation, adaptation and means of implementation and support. And it calls for tripling renewable energy capacity globally and doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency. That means there has been impetus or importance on tripling the renewable energy capacity and also doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements by year 2030. Now this needs to be seen by when and how it would be achieved, right? And it calls for sustainably reducing non-carbon dioxide emissions, including in particular methane emissions globally by year 2030, right? So methane emissions, they were also discussed in COP 28 this particular year. Thereafter, transitioning away from fossil fuels. Now this was one of the most debated, hotly contested issue which was raised in Dubai to COP 28. So COP 28 calls for transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly and equitable manner, accelerating action in this critical decade to achieve net zero by year 2050. Now this remains to be seen, right? And after the end of our discussion with regards to the key outcomes, we will also see that what are the key concerns associated with COP 28, and especially the concerns which are there of the developing country or the least developed countries, right? And to put things into perspective, you can see first global stock take, right? So back in 2018, what we had? We had Talanoa dialogue, right? Talanoa dialogue, or is Talanoa dialogue pe bhi UPSC prelims has asked questions. We will see. Then in 2020, we had NDCs, that is nationally determined contributions. Sorry, and implementation of NDCs and information gathering. So we are in 2023 and it is the first global stock take. And after 5 years, again, we would have a second global stock take. So there are provisions for revisions of NDCs, that is nationally determined contributions, right? So they are different for different countries. And the ultimate objective is that by year 2050, we have to be carbon neutral as well as climate resilient. And we can see in 2020, there was a mention of Talanoa dialogue, right? There were other international agreements, they were also being asked, so Talanoa dialogue. So by these questions, I just want to draw your attention that whenever we are studying anything with regards to UPSC, we have to be very focused in and systematic in our approach. Because always remember that there is a lot of stuff to be remembered of, to be aware of, right? So we have to always keep on trying to stick with the syllabus as well as the PYQs. So Talanoa, this you can very well utilize in your ethics paper also, because Talanoa, it is a traditional word which is used in Fiji and across the Pacific Islands, and it reflects a process of inclusive, participatory and transparent dialogue. Now, how can we use this as a part of ethics paper? We can very well use this as a part of ethics, because the purpose of Talanoa is basically to share the stories and build empathy. I hope you must be aware what is the difference between sympathy, empathy, apathy, etc. and to make wise decisions for the collective good. So these are the keywords for your GS paper 4 as well, right? Now, coming back again to the key outcomes of COP 22, there was a mention of global goal on adaptation. Now, what is this global goal on adaptation all about? So it basically focuses on enhancing the adaptive capabilities. Adaptive capabilities kiske liye chahiye? We have to adapt with the changing climate. And minimizing the vulnerability for sustainable development. So vulnerability as a concept is included in GS paper 3, that is with regards to disaster management. That societies which are more vulnerable, that societies which lack the coping capacity to build back better, to bounce back better. They are more vulnerable to the disasters and hazards for sustainable development, right? And at COP28, this text, it calls for doubling in adaptation finance. Now this is important, right? And the plans for assessment and monitoring of adaptation needs in the upcoming years as well. Then continuing with the key outcomes of COP28 only, there was also a mention about climate finance, right? So UNCTAD, that is United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, it estimates that the wealthy nations owe developing countries USD, that is US dollars, 500 billion US dollars in 2025 under the new collective quantified goals NCQG for climate finance. Now separately, this might be asked as a question in prelims. In fact, a question can be that the term Altera, recently seen in news, is related to which of the following? So Altera, it is also about the climate finance arrangement only, right? So please remember this particular fact also. And climate finance is very crucial. Why finance is crucial? So we should remember that economy drives the world, and it would be always better if it is done ethically also. So definitely we require finance for the purposes of conservation of biodiversity, for climate change mitigation, as well as for sustainable transport. It also calls for climate finance. Adaptation to climate change, renewable energies, they all require finance. Moreover, sustainable agriculture. Why it calls for climate finance? Because all of us are aware that the pressure, the anthropogenic pressure on both land and water as well as air, it is increasing day by day with rising population. But at the same time, the agricultural land that is available for food production, it is shrinking in size. So we require sustainable, climate smart agriculture, and also energy efficiency calls for climate finance, and climate change resilience all are dependent or related to climate finance. And the goal is to set a new collective quantified goal before year 2025. And this goal will start from a 100 billion US dollars per year. So I hope this is clear. Thereafter, there was also a mention of loss and damage fund. So the member countries, they reached an agreement to operationalize this loss and damage fund, which is aimed at compensating countries grappling with climate change impacts. Right? तो हिंदी में एक कहावत आपने सुनी है, जो करेगा वो भरेगा, right? Polluter pays principle. So the developed countries, they definitely owe a responsibility when it comes to climate change, because historically the developed countries of today are responsible for more emission of carbon and other climate changing gases, etc. Right? And a specific percentage is earmarked for the least developed countries and small island developing states. And who will oversee this loss and damage fund is the World Bank. So we should also be careful about the world institutions which are involved. And there was also global renewables and energy efficiency pledge. Now studying this, we should be mindful of the fact कि India किसका party बना है या फिर किस agreement को sign नहीं किया, right? So please comment down, has India or China for that matter signed this pledge, that is global renewables and energy efficiency pledge? Yes or no? Please comment down. So this pledge basically stipulates that the signatories together to triple the world's installed renewable energy, right? So there is mention of tripling the world's installed renewable energy generation capacity to at least 11,000 gigawatts by year 2030. So this is the pledge, and also it calls for collectively doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency. So this we have already read, that tripling the renewable energy capacity by year 2030 as well as doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency from around 2% to over 4% every year until year 2030. And there was also mention of global cooling pledge for COP28, global cooling pledge, because it is no brainer that the cooling appliances, which may be air conditioners or which may be refrigerators, they are responsible for depletion of ozone, they are responsible for creation of greenhouse gases, which traps the outgoing terrestrial radiation and increases the temperature. So it includes 66 national government signatories which have committed to work together to reduce the cooling related emissions across all the sectors by at least 68% globally relative to 2022 levels by 2050. Now these data become important, especially for your prelims examination. And there was also declaration to triple the nuclear energy or nuclear capacity by year 2050. Again, please comment down, has India signed this declaration, yes or no? Right? Now we need to know India at the rate COP28. What were India's commitment, or what has India achieved by this recent COP28? So we should know the initiatives, because in the beginning of the NewsKase session itself, we have seen in 2021, there was an explicitly mentioned question with regards to the commitments which India have made in COP26, right? So Green Credit Initiative. So this is India's initiative, and it was first launched by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in 2023 itself. So this has been conceptualized as a mechanism to incentivize voluntary pro-planet actions. Now these are the keywords which should come into your answer. As an effective response to the challenge of climate change. And it basically envisions the issue of green credits for plantations on waste degraded lands and river catchment areas to regenerate and revive natural ecosystems. So basically this green credit initiatives, तो आपने जरूर सुना होगा carbon credit etc. So this initiative have been conceptualized so as to give incentives to those who are voluntarily working for pro-planet actions, right? And there was also Lead IT 2.0, that is the phase 2 of the leadership group for industry transition. And it will focus on inclusive and just industry transition, co-development and transfer of low carbon technology. Now this is very important, right? Developing low carbon technologies, and financial support to emerging economies for industry transition, because industry is a very crucial link in our fight to climate action. Because if industries would use those technology which are pro-planet, so they would definitely help us achieve carbon neutrality by year 2050 globally. There is also Global River Cities Alliance, and it was launched at COP28 itself. sorry, which was led by National Mission for Clean Ganga under Ministry of Jal Shakti, Government of India. So please remember this Global River Cities Alliance, and it highlights India's role in sustainable river centric development and climate resilience, because it is in our culture to respect rivers as mothers, right? So this platform will facilitate knowledge exchange, river city twinning, and dissemination of the best available practices. And also we can talk about QCWG, that is Quad Climate Working Group on Localized Climate Action, right? And just a small assignment for all of you, please search about QChamp. What is QChamp all about? So the event focuses on recognizing and amplifying the role of local communities, regional governments in supporting sustainable lifestyles, because every stakeholder has to pitch in. Then only sustainable development and growth would be possible. So we had seen what are the key outcomes of COP28 this particular year. We had seen India at COP28, what were the different initiatives. But having said that, there are certain concerns also relating to COP28. The first is there has been no specific timelines for fossil fuel phase out. And the agreement, it lacked an urgent plan for fossil fuel phased out and uses very vague language such as transitioning away without mentioning or giving any specific timelines or targets. Then there is no specific target on tripling global renewable energy. हम सभी ने पढ़ा है what was the outcome? Outcome was to triple the renewable energy capacity. But what the tripling of renewable energy capacity, it is a global target, and it is not at all incumbent on every country to individually triple its current installed capacity. Now this raises a question कि अगर ये हर country के लिए applicable नहीं है, so how would this target be achieved? So thus it is not clear how tripling would be ensured effectively. Moreover, there has been no clear mechanisms for achieving adaptation goals. So how to realize this adaptation goals? What are the mechanisms that would fund these efforts? There has been no mention of such details. Also, lack of accountability on financial commitments. Now this is again a area of concern, and there is currently no established mechanism to hold the governments or institutions accountable for fulfilling their climate financing commitments. This is school में होता था. If we were not able to do our homework, we were made accountable by the teachers. They give us some sort of constructive punishment so that we stick to the deadlines. We do the assignments properly, but there is no such accountability on financial commitments, which would hold the governments and institutions accountable, whether what you have promised and what you have performed, is there is a mismatch or not. Then key concerns also are with regards to varying interpretation of climate finance, because in climate finance, these are compiled by using different methodologies and different techniques, and which can have varying interpretations. तो कई बार क्या possibility हो सकता है that the same funds, they can be reported by multiple parties, and it can lead to overestimation of the actual financial flows. So there is a problem also in interpretation of climate finance. And very important, that is resistance over phase down of coal, right? And there was a move to stipulate that no new coal-fired power plants could be opened. There was a move but it was strongly resisted by countries such as India, China, South Africa and other nations, because there was mention that no new, कोई भी नया coal-fired power plant cannot be open without an inbuilt carbon capture and storage facility. So this was opposed. So this is also a area of concern. Then there were concerns about methane emission cuts. Methane is a greenhouse gas and it is more potent even than carbon dioxide. But we should remember that there are certain countries which would be more sensitive if there is reduction of reduction of methane. And the reason is pretty obvious and pretty clear. What are the major sources of methane emission? So it is the rice or the paddy fields. And in India, around 2/3 of the population, rice is a staple food. And also along with that, livestock or cattle rearing is also a major source of methane emission. Right? So this is again a sensitive issue for a country like India. And you can have a look, you can pause the video and you can see a status check of major parameters. So the criteria is mentioned, the requirement and the current state. For example, if we talk about emissions, so what is the requirement? That immediate peak and rapid reduction 2030 emissions must be 43% below 2019 levels. But what is the current state? Current state is emissions are still rising, right? And as of now, 2030 emissions likely to be just 2% below 2019. Requirement kitna tha? That emission should be 43% below the 2019 levels. But current state, it is just below 2%, right? So there is a huge mismatch. Similarly, for adaptation, at least $215 billion are required per year for funding the adaptation projects in developing countries. But what is the actual state of affairs? It is barely $21 billion which are flowing off as today. And loss and damage, an estimate of 100 billions per year is required, but no money right now for loss and damage. Similarly, for finance, tens of trillions of dollars are needed per year. But even by the modest promised flow of 100 billion per has not been materialized. So you can see there has been a huge mismatch. So what is the way forward? How to go about it? So problem में ही solution है. What is the problem? Problem is finance, right? Climate finance. So there has to be commitment to commit to the climate finance target. There should be clear roadmaps and there should be proper timelines that should be adhered to, right? Thereafter, enhanced national action plans or NDCs, and they can be reflected in the global stock take text also. And legislation and policy support definitely is required. Capacity building regards to what? Capacity building so as to provide training, so as to provide finance, so as to provide technology and provide the necessary resources in order to tackle climate change. And international cooperation is very crucial, because global warming, it is not just a problem of one country, right? It is a common problem, and common problem requires collective actions and collective efforts from all the stakeholders that are there. And you can see 2016 also, UPSC has again asked question with regards to UNFCCC. So I hope you have understood the concept, and you also would have understood what is the importance of PYQs, right? because there are certain themes in UPSC in each and every subject which are more important than others, right? So that is it for today. Thank you very much, and I leave you with a food for thought. That is Prakriti Rakshiti Rakshita. That is nature protect those who protect nature. Thank you very much and have a good time.